Here are the best bits of Matt Dillahunty's debate with Philip Christie.
Fundamentally, I have no use for faith. Now, I know there are a lot of different uses for the term. I tend to define faith as the excuse people give for believing in something when they don't have a good reason. Because ordinarily, if you ask somebody why you believe something and they have a good reason, they just give you the good reason. And if they don't, then they say, hey, it's a matter of faith. And if you think that's a good way to go about deciding whether or not something's real or believable, that's entirely your prerogative. I just have no use for it.
A lot of people also conflate inductive inference with faith. This is why so many apologists will say that science is based on faith because it is largely inductive. They seem to think that any non-apodictic conclusions are the same thing as faith.
I did a debate recently and somebody tried to argue on behalf of the supernatural by telling ghost stories. Somebody woke up in the middle of the night and had an apparition in their bedroom, and this coincided with the death of the loved one who was in the apparition. And that was enough for them to convince that reality has a supernatural component, and that supernatural component includes the ability for spirits of the deceased to come back and visit. And that led them to a belief that therefore there's a soul and therefore there's a God. So this vision that they had that night was enough to serve as the foundation for everything else. I can't do that. I can't do that for a number of reasons. I'm happy to acknowledge that this person had some experience, but I don't have enough information to conclude what that experience actually was.
There are many accounts like this which can be explained by common neurological and psychological causes. Your mind does weird things in hypnopompic and hypnagogic states.
However, my mom also believes that there's no sadness in hell. Or heaven, sorry. Plenty of sadness in hell, she believes. But there's no sadness in heaven. She believes I'm going to hell. Therefore, there's no way my mom can be in heaven if there's no sadness. Because there's no way she could ever not be sad that I'm in hell. There's an internal conflict in her belief structure that sets up something that she doesn't even recognize as problematic.
Some Christians believe that people in heaven can see the people in hell. How could the people in heaven possibly be happy in heaven if they can see their loved ones suffering in hell? Some propose that when you get to heaven, your mind is altered in such a way that you are incapable of not being happy, even with the knowledge that some people are in hell. But if this is true, the people in heaven effectively cease to be the people they were before they got to heaven. To alter people to such a degree is to make them different people altogether.
Sure, so one of the first things you brought up is how sort of argumentation works. And think of modus ponens, okay?
Okay.
So if A, then B, A, then B.
Yep.
How do you actually know that to be the case? Is that actually based on some sort of evidence? Is that based on experience? Do you know that a priori? Is that actually something that you know based on some sort of evidence as you've defined it so far?
The reason why I believe that modus ponens, or any other principle of logic, is valid is because I don't know how to doubt it. I don't understand what it would mean for a modus ponens argument with true premises to not have a true conclusion. The fact that I can't understand what it would mean for a modus ponens to be invalid, of course, doesn't prove that it can't be, but it does mean that if a modus ponens could be invalid, it would be entirely irrelevant to me because I couldn't understand its invalidity even if it were invalid. I believe in the principles of logic because I can't help but believe in them. Even if they are wrong, I don't understand how I could see them as wrong.
There's one thing that you just said a minute ago that I'm a little confused by. That you're not necessarily arguing for a supernatural God. And yet...
Well, I don't know what supernatural means.
I don't either.
Okay.
So we're in agreement we don't have a good definition or understanding, between the two of us at least, of what supernatural is.
Correct.
But...
Well, I'm not so sure we have a good definition of natural either.
Well, we don't have a complete understanding of what is natural.
Sure.
But as we explore the world, we continually add, this is natural. So there is this idea, which I think we perhaps agree on, which is things that are currently labeled as supernatural. I don't know what the justification is for that, other than it being a bucket where you just put things you can't explain.
There are a few dictionaries that will define supernatural as attributed to some force beyond scientific understanding or the laws of nature. Insofar as this refers to something that will forever be beyond scientific understanding, I don't see how we could ever be justified in labeling something as supernatural, because I don't see how we could ever know for sure that nobody will ever be able to reach a scientific understanding of something. Insofar as it merely refers to things for which we currently don't have a scientific understanding, it is just an epistemological classification rather than an ontological one. To say that something is supernatural would simply describe what we know about that thing rather than describing the thing itself.
One of the arguments I found convincing was the Kalam cosmological argument. Whatever begins to exist has a cause, the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. And as I said, I know that this doesn't get us to a definition of, or it doesn't give us to God, but it does tell us what sorts of properties that the entity that created the universe must have.
It doesn't, though. This guy thinks that such a cause must be timeless and spaceless, but it's possible that the existence of this universe is the result of an event which occurred in some other space-time continuum. If we take the premises of the Kalam argument to be true, and I don't think we should, all we can conclude about the cause of the universe is that it's capable of causing a universe.
Within this argument, entities are defined in one of three ways: necessary, contingent, or impossible. So a modality deals with the nature of necessity, nature being what it takes for how something exists, essentially. So necessary entities, I'm just going to give examples of each one. So impossible entities, married bachelors, things of that nature. Contingent entities, you could say like a unicorn. It's possible that a unicorn exists in some possible world, but it doesn't exist in all possible worlds. Necessary entities exist in all possible worlds, cannot fail to exist in any possible world. So necessary entities would be, so I'm a Platonist, so I'm going to say that numbers, absolute truth, shape definitions, laws of logic, laws of absolutes, those things exist necessarily.
I don't see how any entity is necessary. As David Hume rightly pointed out, there is no entity whose non-existence entails a contradiction. I know Christie gave numbers and logic as examples of necessary entities, but numbers are inventions, and logic is a set of descriptions, and it's certainly possible for an invention or a description to not exist.
They exist in all possible worlds. In and of themselves, they cannot fail to exist, and they don't have their existence reliant on any other thing. So, in this sort of argument with, maximally great being, I sort of rushed through it. Belief in God as a maximally great being, going through that argument and actually explaining it a little bit, it is possible that a maximally great being exists. So purely thinking about what it is to be a maximally great being, if you look at it in the same way that you're looking at a logical absolute, or that 2 + 2 = 4, this is simply a belief that automatically forms by pure light of reason. It's not something that you deliberate evidence, it's just there. Well, purely thinking of the concept of a maximally great being, if that belief if it is actually possible, which I think it is, it follows, just in the way of a mathematical proof, that actually does exist.
There are several problems with the ontological argument. One is that greatness is subjective, and it certainly isn't apodictically obvious that existence is greater than non-existence. So it isn't obvious that something maximally great would necessarily exist. Another is that ontological arguments try to demonstrate that something is more than merely fictional or more than merely conceptual, using nothing but concepts. How the fuck could that possibly work? I don't know if you've heard, but I do have a Patreon.